When you think about history, we always focus on the big names, right? The towering figures, the brilliant minds. But have you ever stopped to think about the people standing just outside the spotlight? The quiet collaborators, the indispensable helpers whose names kind of get lost to time? Well, it turns out sometimes the most influential people are the ones we've never even heard of.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We're talking about Ralph Waldo Emerson. I mean, a giant of American thought. And yet, here's a quote from one of his contemporaries, T.W. Higginson, saying that some other guy's greatest service was to Emerson, a great and permanent service. This person was literally entrusted with Emerson's entire legacy. But here's the thing. Most of us have never heard his name. So that's the big question for us today. Who was James Elliot Cabot? Who was this mystery man behind the master? Let's figure this out together. To really get who Cabot was, we've got to start with the role that defined him, at least in the public eye. He was, first and foremost, Emerson's indispensable man. And listen, this wasn't some casual friendship. Cabot's involvement got deeper and deeper over time through three really critical roles. He starts out as a volunteer secretary, then he becomes the literary executor, the guardian of Emerson's entire intellectual world. And finally, he's the one the family chooses as the official biographer. Basically, he became the gatekeeper to everything we know about Emerson. So who was this guy who was handed so much responsibility? To figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning. Cabot was a product of a very specific world, the absolute highest level of 19th century Boston society. James Elliot Cabot was born into what was basically American royalty. The Cabots, the Perkinses, these were the leading families. They were powerful, they were wealthy, they were influential. He was born with a future that was pretty much already mapped out for him. But this world wasn't all just stuffy and formal. It was filled with some real characters. You gotta love this story. After a famous preacher gave a sermon on the evils of alcohol, Cabot's grandfather, Colonel Perkins, goes home and defiantly serves his grandsons a double portion of wine. So that gives you a little taste of the independent, maybe even rebellious spirit that was in the air. And that independent streak? Yeah, it definitely took hold in young Cabot. His education wasn't a straight line to a specific career. Nope, it was more like this winding intellectual journey, a grand tour. At Harvard, he was anything but a typical star student. He couldn't have cared less about his class rank. Instead, he was off doing his own thing, studying natural history, digging up obscure, out-of-the-way books, and getting totally captivated by radical new thinkers like Thomas Carlyle. He was already marching to the beat of his own drum. After Harvard, he does what a lot of wealthy, ambitious, young guys did back then. He heads to Europe. But again, he does it his own way. He goes to Heidelberg just because a popular novel made it sound cool. In Berlin, he pops into lectures by the superstar philosopher Schelling. And in Göttingen, he just dives headfirst into the super dense, complex work of Immanuel Kant. The guy was just soaking it all in. But this is where a little bit of a shadow starts to appear. Cabot himself actually had a name for this whole period of his life. He called it mental sauntering, which, sounds kind of nice, right? Leisurely, thoughtful. But to him, it wasn't a grand discovery. It felt like aimless wandering. He worried that all this learning wasn't actually leading anywhere, that he didn't have a settled purpose. So he tried to find one. He came back, went to Harvard again, got a law degree, and joined a firm. But it only lasted a year. His business partner, a guy who was a born lawyer, basically realized Cabot just wasn't cut out for it. And Cabot agreed. So he left the profession and never looked back. So what do you do if you're not suited for a traditional career, but you're brilliant and you know everyone? Well, as it turns out, you do a little bit of everything. The man wore a lot of hats. Just look at the sheer range of his life. He managed a literary journal. He went on a scientific expedition as both its secretary and its illustrator. He even became a partner in an architecture firm. And on top of all that, he was a pillar of Boston's civic life, helping get places like the Museum of Fine Arts off the ground. All that sauntering had actually made him an intellectual jack of all trades. And this is really the heart of his story. How do we measure the value of a life like this? A life that dabbled in so many things but didn't master just one. A life spent more on helping others and on building up his own name? Now, this is what I find absolutely fascinating. This is Cabot's own take on his life from his autobiography. He saw it as a waste of time and energy. He genuinely believed that his mental sauntering had stopped him from ever accomplishing something worthwhile. By his own judgment, he was a failure.
Let's just put these two views side by side because this says it all. On one hand, you have Cabot's own bleak perception, a wasted life, accomplished nothing. But then look at his biographer's take. Higginson saw a guy who helped countless people, whose wide-ranging knowledge gave him a rare breadth of intellectual sympathy, and who, through all his quiet work, helped to enlarge and ennoble the thinking of his entire generation. It's like they're talking about two totally different people. And that's the big, profound disconnect here. The man who preserved the legacy of one of America's greatest thinkers saw his own life as a complete failure. But everyone else, they saw him as the ideal citizen, a high-minded, noble person whose contributions were quiet, but absolutely immense. And that really leaves us with a question to chew on, doesn't it? Cabot's story forces us to ask what success really means. Is it that one single great accomplishment that gets your name in the history books? Or could it be something else? Could it be the quiet, steady work of supporting others, of helping to enlarge and ennoble the world in ways that might never get the big headlines? It's something to think about,